Welcome back. So let's talk human capital development. About 90 million people, that's roughly Nigeria's half of Nigeria's population, live in extreme poverty. And that's going by estimates from the World Data Lab's poverty clock. Around June 2018, Nigeria overtook India. That's a country with about 7 times, our population. We have taken over as the the bottom of...
Perhaps there are more poor people in Nigeria than the entire population of other countries.
Well, you know what? Let's just look at how we can develop, our human capital and deal with the issues of unemployment. So this morning we have in the house the country director, Social Welfare Network Initiative, Emmanuel Osemeke. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. Good morning.
And an education consultant, Yomi Fawemi.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Fawemi, let me start with you.
Okay.
Why should we develop our human capital? How important is it?
Okay, so why should we develop our human capital? Because it's human capital. I mean, that's a basic thing. So, I mean,
yes,
if you remember that
capital, we decide to develop other things, and
Yeah, that's the peculiarity. So there are four.
Build the roads.
Traditional economics says there are 4 factors of production: land, labor, capital, and entrepreneurship. And what has been found is the fact that the capital element that determines the effectiveness of the order of the 4 elements is human capital. So it's part of your capital stock. It's only that is the one that determines what will happen to your capital, as in cash, investments, roads, what will happen to your land, what will happen to it. So that's the peculiarity of human capital. It's the capital that determines what happens to all the factors of production. So you realize that there is no poor or rich country. I mean, so you have countries like Singapore that was pushed out of Malaysia because it was seen as a non-productive part of Malaysia. But they developed their human capital, and today, that's one of the richest countries in the world today. Nigeria and Indonesia is a country that looks more similar in terms of location, geography, population, diversity of religion. But look at what Indonesia has made of itself to become. South Korea was a country struggling a couple of years back. They invested in human capital, and that has made the difference at the end of the day. So if you put a country that has all the resources in the world, the oil and the gold, I mean, and if you, for example, look at it from this point of view, that the richest continent in terms of mineral resources in the world is Africa. I mean, there's countries in Africa that have virtually most of the major mineral resources, but the quality of the human capital is not so high. The result is obvious. Where are we discussing poverty capital being in Nigeria or somewhere else? So that is what is very, very important about human capital. So we just finished the Nations Cup, right? Nigeria came third, which seems to be our permanent position these days. Nigeria is the most populated country in Africa. So why are we coming third? How come was Iceland able to go to the World Cup and defeat many countries when all the people that play for Iceland are not more than the people that are inside Unilag and College of Medicine? How come does Iceland have a good ranking? So you realize that it's not, so the world is no more counting number of people. Before now, I mean, many years ago, human capital was, oh, I needed to farm, so I need to have many children. In today's world, I don't need to have so many people. I can actually use one person to make a difference. I mean, your last segment, you were talking about the Face app that's changing stories. The guys that develop those things, that's human capital. Those same guys, if you didn't send them to school, they'll be selling gala on Yanoworo. Serena Williams, Roger Federer, if they were living in a country that did not develop their human capital, they will still have the capacity to play tennis. It's only that they will not see a tennis racket to hold. So that's a challenge. A player is struggling in Nigeria, he goes to Europe. I mean, one classical example I can never forget is a player like J.J. Okocha. Excellent player playing in Nigeria, went to Europe, went to play for Bolton, was made captain of Bolton, and anybody who followed the band's game realized the transformation that happened to this person. Anthony Joshua, we call him in Nigeria, let's assume he is, whether it's not. If Anthony Joshua was not here and he could still box, you know where he will likely be boxing today? Maybe at the garage. So the question is, if you don't invest in your human capital, whatever you do, you're just wasting your time, because those human capital will bring everything to the level you have given them. You just talked about cyber data, cyber security. You know, I told a friend of mine that that thing called smartphone is called a smartphone because it's a phone that is smart. right? All phones are phones, right? Including the one, remember when we were young, the one you dial and go around and around. They are also phones, but this one is called a smartphone. Now, if you give a smartphone to a non-smart person, he will only remember as a phone and will not remember the smartness in the phone, right? But if you give a smart person a smartphone, he can do anything with it. To the extent that you can actually, like somebody told me, that he had to do, he wanted to change the remote, he wanted to change the channel on his television, and downloaded an app on the smartphone, and it became a remote control changer.
Absolutely.
That's the capacity of human capital. Yeah. It's human capital that will make somebody say, I don't want to fight boxing. I don't like boxing. I don't like to be beaten. And I'm sure some people don't like, some people don't mind being beaten. I mean, I don't like to be beaten. I'm going to become a promoter. And then he calls the two of you to fight and says how much he will give the two of you. And he's sipping champagne while you are pommeling yourself. And after the game, you go, both of you will go to the hospital. Both of you will go to the hospital if you was a champion. But he goes home to go and spend the money. That's human capital that determines who is on the stage at the end of the day. So that's the question. The last example I want to give, I'm trying to give an example for you to see human capital. A couple of years back, we played a award on one of these age grade competitions, and the best player was recorded to be Lionel Messi.
2005.
2005. The second best player in the world was Mikel Obi. And the third player was Tai Taiwo.
Yes.
2019. In the last 10 years, Messi had won World Best Player in the World 5 times.
Everything.
In the last 10 years, 5 times. The number 2 to him was Mikel Obi. Mikel Obi has not won World African Player of the Year. He has retired now, so he can't win again. So what happened that as young guys, they were number 1, number 2, and number 3. And then a couple of years after, the number 1 remained number 1. Well, if you want to argue whether it's number 1 or number 2, I mean, if you're comparing with the Ronaldo, I don't know.
He's not nowhere.
Yeah. Now, the number 2 and number 3, the gap has grown. That's human capital investment.
So my question is, what are those things that will create such huge gap in our human development compared to other nations?
Okay, for me, I mean, having been, I'm a rural person. I'm not an educationist like Mr. Yomi, right? The fact is clear. Systems. Nigeria has fantastic systems on paper, but implementation have been next to zero. So you want to look at what has affected development of human capital. I mean, it took, I think it was Bill Gates, last year or 2 years ago, to come to Nigeria to advise the government that yes, it's good to build roads and schools and all that, but human capital is very important because that's one of the reasons why our airport is the way it is. But if you go to Ethiopia, they have the best airport. We don't have a national carrier, but Ethiopia lives on Ethiopian Airlines. Why? They've done the right things, they put the right persons, and they've allowed them to work. So Nigeria has been able to come up with, over the years, several what you would call social safety nets to be able to improve the life of supposed poor, which we don't have any data on. Today, I think 2 years ago, last year, we came up with this poverty capital. Today is multidimensional poverty. So your population has grown to 201 million or 210, as some will call it, 90 million growing in extreme and multidimensional poverty. Why? Several social safety nets have come on board. Social protection programs have come on board. What happened to those programs? How impactful were those programs? What informed those programs? Because they were all geared towards the same building the capital of the individual persons. So I take an example from the US. They have food stamp, they have social security that they pay to a certain category of people because they don't want them to go below a particular level. And for you to qualify to get that money, you need to be at a certain level. Here, what's the qualification? So I take a cue from the present administration's SIP programs. For you to get the 5,000, you need to be poor. So what is poverty in Nigeria? We don't have. So we we took the World Bank Poverty Parameter Index, which the question I asked is, okay, World Bank Poverty Index or parameter, is it the same with Nigerian poverty parameter? The answer is no. So ab initio, the plan for the social safety net is faulty. That's why you don't have impact. So you look at 5,000 for the extreme poor in the rural community. So what can 5,000 do in a month? That's number one question. So we say, oh, the government says we are spending 500 billion annually on SIP programs, and you're targeting XYZ number population. The question is, what informed that? What data did you use to get to that number? So, for example, you have a family of 10, okay, including everybody inclusive, and your income is 10,000. So, average 1,000 per person. So, how long would 1,000 go for each person? So, the major issue we have as a country is system and implementation of our systems. We have lofty programs, sometimes not well thought out. You have, in the last administration, you had You Win, you had the Shopee programs, and you had several other programs. This administration took all of those programs, rechristened them, and tweaked them a little bit, and their implementation is somewhat different. So you are feeding 3.5 million children in order to reduce the out-of-school children. But the number is increasing. How many children are we getting into school versus how many children are we keeping in school? And it goes beyond getting them into school. It also begs the question, what quality of education are they getting? Because every education is meant to build human capital.
Yeah.
So what is quality of education? Then you talk about nutrition issues and all that. So it's endless.
Okay, let me go to Mr. Fawemi. The narrative used to be in the last decade that perhaps something is wrong with the black man's brain. But you see, in the last decade as well, some black nations have proved that wrong. They've improved. Why is Nigeria still here? And what must we do? Because we can't continue to be here. The best of our brains are already leaving the country, because that's the population. That's a subset of the population we can use to change things. They're leaving. How can we plug this bleeding?
Okay, we have quite a lot of things to do. I mean, so what are the direct things that will influence our human capital? Number one, education, quality, quantity, health. Now, health is big, beyond the availability of nutrition, drugs, immunization, and things like that. Water supply, and then the mind of the people, giving them the positive mentality. So we as a country has found ourselves here, and there's nothing biologically the issue with the black brain. However, it's also important for us to realize that one of the things that determines the effectiveness of the impact on human capital is how much of your brain you are using while you are doing that. So, for example, in the current government has a school feeding program, fantastic program. However, anybody who is feeding somebody who has started primary school is too late. Science says by age 2, 70% of your brain has been formed.
Yep.
So if a child is not fed adequately by age 2, you're wasting your time after he gets to school. The other part of it is that beyond that 70% is the fact that Nigeria and 2 other countries account for the majority of stunted children in the world. If a child is stunted by age 5, he can't recover. If you move that child by age 5 is stunted, you move him to the best place in the world. You can't get him to recover what he has lost in 5 years. So that's where the brain comes in. So it's not about school, it's not about feeding children, it's about when and what you are feeding them with. You miss the year 0 to 2 window, you have missed it. And therefore, when we are doing school feeding program for people who have not eaten in 2 years, first 2 years, we're just wasting their time. Because there's for some cases, there's nothing that can be done any longer. And science has proved that. So part of what we need to do is, okay, all this intervention, we should base it on knowledge. I mean, I tell people that one of the problems I have, anybody who studied science will remember that your first topic you taught in science is certain laws of whatever subject. Then they will tell you reforms to the law, because some people have taken time to check whether those laws were, and they say it's not correct. Sometimes in Nigeria, Nigerian leaders attend the first class, but they did not go to the second class, where they said this has been reformed. So school feeding program is established in literature as a very effective way to develop human capital, particularly to retain children there. But the school feeding program is based on what has happened before the guy gets to school. So that's something we need to do. One thing we need to also start to do is that we need to find something to do to reduce the rate at which we are giving birth to children. There is no way we will solve this poverty problem if we don't control our population. Let me tell you something that's shocking.
201 million now.
Depending if you are counting from morning to night or morning, if you know in Nigeria, if you count from front to the back, you will not get results if you count from the back to the front.
Yep.
So we don't know our number. I mean, that's a fact.
So let's go with the UNFPA number.
Whatever. I mean,
when someone's telling you how many you are.
Okay, so, and that again talks about the reason why you can't plan for them. That's the reason why you don't know how much food to even prepare for them. So you don't know. But the question we need to ask ourselves is that in 3 years, Nigeria added 9 million to the working population. 9 million people joined the working population. If you check the number of African countries that don't have 9 million population, they're quite a number.
Yeah.
So in 3 years, that means that in 2016, 17, and 18, I think, we added an average of 3 million people to the working population. You know the implication of that? That's potential creation of 3 million jobs. Now, this government promise was going to be creating 3 million jobs every year. Well, while I know there have been debate whether they said it in the day or in the night, but something like that was said. So if we created 3 million jobs every year as promised, we will only be catching those that just graduated. Those that are in areas are still there. So we need to do something to raise we are producing children. The system cannot accommodate it. That is what they call in ecological science carrying capacity. We have exhausted our carrying capacity. So we need to regulate that. When we now regulate that, when those children are born, we need to ensure that their parents feed them adequately. Nutrition, immunization, non-negotiable for those children. Finally, when those children go to school, they must learn and learn well. You know, one of the things that happens in Nigeria, we've talked about number of children out of school. I always say because there are children that are out of school, as in they are not in school. There are also those that are in school but are not present.
Okay.
Yeah. Right?
They are physically there.
They are physically there, but they are not there. Now, there are those that are in that.
Those are the ones that the government is trying to capture, just so they know that they have food, and then they can, pay a bit more attention.
Again, to talk about the reason why we need to stop using old textbook to deal with current situation, let me tell you what happened in one of the states. They said
before you tell us this, what happened in one of the states, we'll just take this quick break and we'll be back. Welcome back. So, Mr. Fawaimi, you were about to tell us the story from a particular state.
Yeah, okay. So this state decided to do the school feeding program. And that's why I said we need to be reading the current textbooks. So what did they decide to do? Because the name of the program is school feeding program. They were only providing food, no water. So what science has shown is that don't give the children breakfast. Give them mid-lunch. So they give these children breakfast in this state, and there is no water. So after eating in school, the children will say, Master, we want to go and drink water at home. You won't stop them. All the children will go home. They're only showing up tomorrow. They won't come back to school that day.
Real life story?
Yeah, I'm telling you the states. The states in Nigeria, the governor is one of the very governors that speaks very loudly about what he's doing in education. So they had to stop it because they realized that children just come, sing at the assembly, eat breakfast, go home to drink water, and don't come back. I mean, the question that's a problem, that's a design problem. Because science has said, yeah, okay, it's called school feeding, but the feeding must be within holistic. And the timing of the feeding is critical to whether the child stays or not. If you give him too early, he looks for a reason to go. If you give him too late, he's hungry before you give it. So they say, target to give him midday meals, the 11 to 12 o'clock range. That's what science says we should do today. Is that what we're doing? So that again talks about what we need to do. So talking about this educational system and can help to develop human capital. One of the things we need to also start to think about Nigeria is that is a curriculum such that can make our children what we want the child to be. So there are still children today that are studying in universities or college of education. They are still in Fortran 77. Fortran 77 is called Fortran 77 because it was made in 1977. And somebody is still in school studying it. There are still children today that are still learning subjects using tools that will never get them competitive. Like I told somebody jocularly that if you're still carrying T-square in your 400 level of architecture, I can determine what you will design in life. If you are not started using computer-aided design, because now technical drawing in some secondary school is now using computer-aided design. So we need to do an holistic response to using education to develop human capital. Ask yourself that basic question. All these people who talk about building this app, making a lot of difference in the world, it's not as if they have very fantastic education, as in they have doctorates or whatsoever. Some of them even dropped out of university. But the question is that the quantum and the quality of education they got in that short period was significant. The last point I want to make on this, and it's very important, is we need to form a partnership to improve education. Have you thought about it that in many states, the commissioner for education is not interested in education? In many states. The governor is not seriously passionate about education. Not seriously. And I'm saying it because I've seen it before. When I was growing up, I'm an Ibadan boy. I grew up in Ibadan. We used to have a governor called Paul Tafa, military man. When this man is going to work in Agodi, God save you, he meets you on the road after 8 o'clock. 8 o'clock was the resumption of public schools. Paul Tafa will come down from the car and physically cane you. Nobody goes late to school. That's a governor that is passionate about education. 1980, when Bola Ige started free education and started the mass bringing of children to school, Bola Ige wrote a letter to every child who was joining school in Oyo State. That's a governor that has passion for it. So that's what we don't have. Unfortunately, the arm of government that seems to be closer to the grassroots when it comes to education is the state governors. Have you come to think about it? Every time WAEC result comes out and there's a ranking of the state, have you ever heard any governor in Nigeria come on here to lament my people failed so badly?
Yeah.
So the question is that the people know they don't. So we need to hold the government accountable. We need to hold parents accountable to ensure we have this partnership to focus on human development. Now, the funniest thing about human development is that we don't know who is going to be the star child. Because what we have done as elites, everybody sitting here, I think we'll call us elites, is that we'll say, okay, all right, if Nigeria doesn't care about human capital, I'm going to care about the human capital of my child. And so I'm going to send my child to the best school. Maybe that's the strategy. But if we knew that a president of Nigeria would be a child who attended a public school in Otuoke, we might not have done that strategy. Maybe we'll have built Chrisland in Otuoke, or built Loyola Jesuit in Otuoke, or built Loyola Jesuit in Daura. The question is that we don't know which child will come through that system and become our president, and become our governor, and become whatever it could be. I was just doing a study of all the chief justices of Nigeria in the last couple of years. A single department has produced over 60% of our chief justices of Nigeria. A single department in this country. So the point I'm making is that you can't afford to say, okay, I only train my child. Your neighbor's child will influence your child. The guy that goes to church or mosque with your child will influence your child. The boy who went to that very horrible school will find his way, graduate, and become an engineer. You want to build a house, you call him, you know what can happen. So we must all have this holistic approach. Every Nigerian child must be developed and built.
Mr. Osemeke, okay, so you look at the picture that we're painted now, and the appropriate response should be that anyone who, even as much as passed through the country within 24 hours, knows that these people are not thinking about anything but this human capital development. But it doesn't appear that that's happening. We don't even have ministers 4 months into a fresh administration. We don't appear that we're doing anything serious. We can't feel it. We cannot feel it. So, again, a lot of people have accused people at the helms of affairs now that they feel they are slow and all of that. How can the society help an administration that doesn't appear is serious about taking charge and making sure that we're moving in this direction? Lives are wasting.
Okay, fantastic question, I must say. I think one of the things I've said in the past is that when the rave or corruption is the greatest problem Nigeria has, I said no. Nigeria's greatest problem is leadership. Someone said that Nigeria is cursed with leadership, and I said, no, we're not cursed with leadership. It's the choices we've made. We've made wrong choices over time. So he talked about, Mr. Yomi talked about Iceland, and I went to Sweden and Poland. I think in Sweden, if I'm not wrong, The highest paid employers are the teachers.
Finland.
Is it Sweden?
Finland.
Finland. The highest paid people are the teachers. And go and look at their ranking, human capital ranking. Yeah. So, in Nigeria, who are the highest paid? You know the answer. So, what are our priorities? That's the first question. We got wrong people in the wrong places across all strata, the federal, states, and the rest of them. If you have, out there we're talking, and I told someone, I said, if we can concentrate on competence, if you get a competent person to lead, you will see the difference. We've seen some people whom, in my own personal view, I've tagged semi-competent because we've really not, used our best. Okay, you Google across the world, you hear Nigerian names doing
excellent.
Oh my goodness, the guy that bought the Gatwick Airport. Yes, and the other airport. I mean, I'm like, how did that happen? You read through his history, see his story, see his ascension, the things he did, deliberate things. And you go right around the world, you see Nigerians doing fantastic things, excellent things. These are the people we should be harnessing. So here we have a Dangote in the midst of 200 million people who seem to be thinking right, or who seem to be taking the right risks. So you have that kind of a guy who's in the private sector and who will never dream of public sector because he knows he won't be able to deliver. So these are some of the issues that personally I have looked at and I'm asking myself, so how do we make that change? First off is that it will definitely have to start with the leadership, current leadership. Telling ourselves the truth. We need to first the leadership needs to have clear direction where you want to leave Nigeria after, is it 3 years or 4 years remaining? In the next 3-4 years.
All right, so
it's about legacy.
So my question is, yes, it's the leadership.
Yes.
But we are not getting that body language. We're seeing that from people's responses. We're not getting that body language. We can't wait for 4 years. And I'm not alluding to removing the president or anything like that. So what I'm saying, how can you make someone who is not behaving or responding appropriately to the situation at hand? How can you help?
The civil society has a big role to play here. In the last few years, the civil society have gone cold. Why, I don't know, and I don't think I will know in the next 1 year. In the past, the civil society used to be so vibrant. They were the ones really who were speaking truth to power. They were the ones who used to make the leadership of the country, at different levels, to be responsive, to be responsible. So you see where people are able to push certain agendas, for government. A new government comes on board, agendas are set for them, and the government listens, government sits down with people, get the best brains to do the work. Unfortunately, today, we don't seem to have that. Someone amongst the last set of panels, the last panel talked about us looking at the service chiefs and creating a spread, but based on competence. Because there's no particular group that has the monopoly of knowledge or intelligence. No, you need to, Nigeria is a homogeneous society. So you must reflect and understand that. I see that often when former President Obasanjo speaks. In his writings, he keeps talking about you must harness that potential across board to create that unity and cohesion that you need to be able to push Nigeria forward. If you will have this sectionalization and one-sided, view of development or impact, if you go in the direction we've been going in the last 4 years. So the civil society needs to seriously wake up. The way they spoke through to power from the military days all the way to the Jonathan administration, and at the end of Jonathan administration, all the civil society went to bed or they took a vacation. I don't know why. So it's important we also wake up and do our job.
Okay, so you've talked about, political will in that capacity, and Yomi Williams is also talking about it on Twitter. He's saying that the political environment and good governance have a pull and push effect on human capital development. And so, while we are waiting for that political will to happen, is there anything that we can do in our spaces as individuals, as families, to ensure that this human capital we're talking about starts, directly from us?
Yeah, I think so. Part of this is what you're doing here. I mean, you're talking about it. That's something that can be done. If every pastor shows up in church tomorrow to preach about it, then that's something else that has been done. If every imam shows up on Friday and talks about it, and people start to take action items, I think that there are things we can do in our little spaces. Of course, it's not going to be as effective as if government does it, but there's something we can do. One, focusing on the human development of the people that we're directly responsible for, but also taking responsibility for the institutions that can influence around us. So why don't we agree, for example, in Lagos and create a structure where every private school has a responsibility to the closest public school to it? And because there are schools that they change the furniture almost every year. I mean, they say, well, the chair is no more okay or the computer is no more okay. Why don't we create a structure where...
There's the other school close to it where the children are,
they're sitting maybe on the floor. So why don't we, for example, those schools now start to think about that, create that social responsibility. Why don't we, for example, start as resident association? So there is Magodo Estate Reservoir, there is Gowan Estate Reservoir. Why don't that part of the role of that resident association to influence the public school in that estate and start to, we have PTA teachers, parents associations here. Why don't we start to have resident association teachers, where the residents association will decide, okay, we're going to pay for the English or the math teacher in this public school. Why don't we, when we do career day in our children's private school, why don't we start to also look for opportunity to start to do career day in the public school? Why don't we start? I mean, what I'm just saying is that all of us have that singular opportunity to think about what we need to do about that. The funniest thing, and why we must take this very seriously, and I always try to emphasize this, is a question of numbers. So look at that, your child's brilliant and good school. How many students will be there? 100, 200. There are schools in Lagos where a classroom, as in they have 1A, 1B, 1C, 1D, one ham alone is 200, and maybe the old school has 5 or 6 classes, that's 1,200. Your child attends this 100-member school and you're happy about it. There is 1,200 outside. The funniest thing, your child is already in the minority. It's going to get worse in the next 15 years because those children may not continue education. The girls will likely get married on time. And what has been found is that if a woman doesn't have secondary education, she will likely have to have more children. She will likely have children very early. So what happens is that those guys marry themselves. They start giving birth at age 18 or 17. Your own child is still writing, I'm getting to university. By the time your child is 25, just doing NYC, this woman has given birth to 6 children. Your daughter is just leaving school, your son. A year after he has a child, that woman has her 8th child. You know what has happened now? That your grandson has 8 children to compete with. Those 8 children will suffocate that guy. Wow. Let that guy be about his thing. They're going to ensure he doesn't have the life he wants to live. And perhaps that's what we're already experiencing now in Nigeria today. If you want to go and outside Lagos, you pray. We used to pray for road accidents. We stopped praying for road accidents. And because road accidents is no more the fear. You know what we now pray for when we are going across Lagos? Now, we felt that was our problem. Somebody went on social media and showed somebody trying to climb an aeroplane yesterday. Those are the human capital you are ignoring. We need to do something about it. And the number is increasing.
And you have said that we should look at education and health. Yeah, and you've talked about, structures for these things to happen. Thank you so much for coming on this morning. An education consultant, Yomi Fawayemi, and country director, Social Welfare Network Initiative, Emmanuel Osemeke. Thank you both for coming on this morning.
Thank you very much.
So we'll take another break, and when we come back, we'll be food safety. Yes.